doing the ones that you have been doing, the self-hip glide. So again, if you've got something that you can kind of create a belt with that, which I think you told me that you did, we started by getting ourselves set up. So you are going into kind of a single knee to chest stretch. You go as far as you can until you start to feel maybe a little bit of kind of, no sharpness, but maybe a little crowding in the front of that hip. And then that's where the other leg begins to press kind of downward into the strap to give yourself a little glide. You'll hold that for a few breaths and then release. You may find that you can go a little further, and I would repeat that probably about 3 to 5 times, just as long as you still feel like, you're making kind of leadway and seeing improvement each time. So 2 that I wanted to, I don't know that we went over, but I was thinking for kind of the rib cage mobility, the rib cage and the articulation of the spine and kind of placement of the rib cage is a good old chest lift. So I've got my feet together, my pelvis is resting, my head is really supported. It's hammocked in the hands and my elbows are in my peripheral vision. I'm gonna exhale and kind of feel my ribs start to drop down into the mat as I curl forward. I'm gonna inhale and reach my arms forward. I'm gonna grab with my arms. I'm gonna use my hands as I bring myself, whether I bring myself higher or not, I wanna think about curling a little deeper, but I'm using my arms to really assist me. I'm gonna bring my hands back behind the head and then lower back down. And you can do that probably a good 4 to 6 times is probably enough. So again, you exhale to lift, you inhale to reach, grab behind the thighs, curl deeper on the exhale and use those arms to get there. Hands come back behind the head and then lower back down. And so that can lead you into an assisted roll up, which I think we were just kind of working on again, kind of the articulation or the movement of the spine and kind of movement into that roll up. So I've got my hands behind my thighs. I'm gonna push my legs forward a little bit, even just to kind of get myself started. So I'm kind of pushing into my hands. I'm gonna begin to, again, chest lift or curl the upper body forward. And then there's gonna be a point where I've gotta use the legs a little bit more to bring me up. At the top of the movement, Kathleen will sit or lengthen through the spine. And then we lower back down by rolling the pelvis back. You're gonna leave the legs, leave the legs, leave the legs, leave the legs until finally they just kind of follow you back down. And that one I'd say maybe about 3 to 5 times. And then let's go into the side lying open book that we did, and starting maybe with hands behind the head to again cradle. You've got the lower body staying pretty steady. You may notice on the first 1 or 2 that it moves a little bit like the top leg, but you want to try to keep it pretty steady. So you can do a few there, trying to keep the length of the spine, taking your time. And then I believe how we added to it, of course you've done, I believe, like for instance, the upper arm extended. So when the arm comes up, it's gonna land right at about the shoulder level or on the body, and then you rotate, opening up. But I wanna keep that arm kind of on the same line. So for instance, the front of my shoulder is just a nice smooth line, the back of my shoulder is a nice smooth line. So you can do a few with the arm extended. And then we ended up practicing Kathleen, the idea of kind of an opposite. So as you open up, you're gonna extend the top leg so you're making a diagonal, really reaching, and then switching that out. Really reaching in opposition. And so that whole series, you can do each of the variations maybe about 2 or 3 times. And then of course you will repeat it on both sides. And then last but not least, or I say that, we got 2 things. I would do 2 more things. We talked about pelvic clocks in quadruped. So first, really concentrating at the pelvis, you're just kind of drawing the tail under and then tipping the tail towards the ceiling. So that's very much kind of your posterior and anterior tilt. But then you're gonna start circling the pelvis around. And the idea is that your pelvis is moving around those thigh bones over the femurs, or the femoral head, which the thighs are steady right now, and so it's the pelvis having to move. And you'll do that both directions, and eventually you might come to the point where the ribs move a little bit more, kind of in response. So pelvic clocks, maybe about 4 each direction. And then lastly, you had been doing kind of that hip glide where you were laying on your stomach. My leg's not quite at hip level, it's a little bit lower. And the idea, Kathleen, is my force, if there was an arrow, it would be driving straight out, the thigh driving straight out through the knee. So it's going on that line. So I'm reaching out, and the idea would be that the front of my, or the kind of like my inner thigh groin area is being drawn to the mat. But it comes from reaching through the thigh, reaching through the knee to try to get that pelvis a little more flush to the mat. And that one, again, maybe about 5 to 7 times, just as long as it feels